Hello, fellow Nerfers. This is the 8-Bit Fiend. I'm an admin for the Sheboygan area Nerf group, otherwise known as SheBANG. SheBANG. If you're watching this right now, it's probably because you saw my post either on the Crew Auxiliary board on Facebook or on our Nerf on Reddit. Had a few people asking me about a project I've recently done. It is based on LUCHATHOR's expanded Plunger Tube, the Sledgefire mod for a Hammershot, and might as well get down to it and show you. Oh, by the way, thanks to everyone on Reddit and the auxiliary who liked the post and upvoted it. It was really surprising that anyone cared about my stupid mod. But yeah, so thank you all. And if you're just finding this through YouTube, which is where I'm going to be posting this after I'm done, thanks for the click. And to anyone who's interested, I'm planning on doing some other kind of mod, not really mod guides, but just more show off what I've done. But without further ado, here is my mega Sledgefire, or my mega SledgeHammer, I'm sorry. So, the SledgeHammer, like I said, is based off of LUCHATHOR's expanded Plunger Tube using a Sledgefire Plunger Tube. The main reason he did that is he had noticed originally that the plunger rod and stuff are the same length. So it made it possible that you could actually use this with actually a fairly simple modification. I'll just do a little bit of looky-loos here. If you compare this to, here, let me set this down. If you compare this to a regular hammer shot here, you can see that I cut back the shell up here, kind of rounded it off so that I could clear these bits from the AR, which comes from this Modulus thing. I was never going to use this because, frankly, I don't like that it doesn't line up with the lines of any blaster, really. So I just, it's just been sitting in my bin of stuff. Me and another admin at SheBANG, Titan, had been discussing doing we're implementing shields in our games, so we were kind of discussing doing modified hammer shots for Mega. He has a 3D printer, and so he's doing the traditional barrel. He's designing his own because some of the designs aren't the greatest in the world out there. They're a little thin, so he's having issues with the printing of it. For me, I like hacking apart things and gluing them back together. So that's pretty much when like a year ago, I think it's like a year ago, I saw the Plunger Tube mod, and I decided that was a good way to power the AR from the Modulus barrel. So, like I said, I cut back the shell to fit in the barrel. I ended up removing the little post part here. It's not very clean right now. I'll probably build that back up at some point with epoxy putty, but right now it's fairly solidly put together. If you look at the top, I have the zip ties. That's not needed. I'll probably end up using some DevCon and just permanently affixing that to the trigger guide and everything, because that's all one system in there. I'll show that to you in a second. And really all I ended up losing was the single screw post, which is right there from my build. I didn't need to cut this out. I'll show you everything that I did on the inside of this in a little bit here. But yeah, this is about a 2-inch by 3-inch gap. If you compare it to the original one here, basically I had to cut back this way back there, and you can see I probably have to do some more shell cutting or interior shell cutting so that I can get clearance. So because right now there's a lot of flex in there. I mean, that screws together nicely, but I still get some flex from the orange shell. Also probably have to do a little bit of shell work on the inside for the front here, because if you can, not sure if it comes across on the camera, but the bar, the rail actually sits at an angle as opposed to completely straight, and that's because the plastic here is pushing it up, so I just need to trim out a little bit more plastic there. Yeah, so yeah, let's get into the internals on this thing. So this was actually I picked this up at a Goodwill, and it didn't function. I noticed right away that someone had cut out the dart posts, and I assumed that other work had been done to it. So what I ended up doing was just hanging it up on my board of things to get back to later to figure out. And once I actually did open this up, all the screws are loose, so I'm just finishing them up here. But what I ended up finding was kind of interesting. Not only did they cut the dart posts out of the original barrel, which is fairly standard mod, they also for some reason they wrapped the tape around the back side of the plunger head, right behind the O-ring. I think they were attempting to seal, or to get a better seal on with the O-ring, but the way they did it, it didn't actually do anything. And when I got further into the blaster, I actually found that they had used cardboard as a what's holding on here? They used a bit of cardboard as plunger head padding, which I don't recommend because it doesn't work. And that's actually what made the gun inoperable completely at the time, so that's why I could not fire darts out of it when I tried testing it. Let's see. But yeah, even further, once I actually opened up this blaster, they'd also removed the foam seal, or the foam seal had fallen off at some point. So that's pretty much made this blaster somewhat worthless as a actual blaster. This freaking screw will not come out. There we go. Alright, so as you can see, here are the internals. Let me get this out of the way here. So a lot of zip ties here holding this all together. So if you look at it, basically it's the plunger tube from a Sledgefire. It's hammered primed yet. Right now I have it double sprung. Otherwise it's pretty much a Hammershot. I know someone had mentioned, it's like, so you basically made a Hammershot that shoots mega. That's exactly what I did. So I may have been a little smarmy to the guy, but yeah. So anyways, that's right now I have the whole thing all set up. So the plunger tube, I ended up cutting. There's a spot in the, if you have ever opened up a Sledgefire, you'll know that there's like a brace in there to keep the plunger from impacting the front of the tube. The tube actually goes for like another, probably like ½ inch or so, but it's basically all dead space because the draw of it only goes up to this point. So I ended up cutting it back exactly to just in front of that plastic spacer thing that they have in the tube, and then I took a piece of acrylic and DevConned it to the front. There was some air holes or air leakage, so I ended up just down and dirty, just ended up slopping some epoxy on there to get an airtight seal. I then took the AR and I cut it to just like these are, I believe, I'm not exactly sure, I haven't cut open one of these completely, but I'm assuming the springs and the compression all happens in this part, so I ended up leaving those just because I wasn't sure what it was actually inside these little 4 little notches. And I cut the intake, the air intake from the original AR, and basically DevConned it to the front of a plunger head, or to the plunger tube, I'm sorry. So as you can see, like, I ended up cutting off the original, this was what held the original plunger tube in place. I ended up cutting that off, and then I wrapped this tube in a little bit of sandpaper to round out the same space so that it would sit in there nicely in the original brackets. And then I zip tied it all together, as you can tell. The reason I had to, like, these are some bracing zip ties, is right now, because since I haven't DevConned this whole thing back together, or together, I ended up having to, every time I would prime it back and release the trigger, whoops, the whole plunger tube would push forward, and it'd slowly inch forward every time I did it. So I ended up putting a zip tie here to hold it in place, and another one there as well. I mean, it's not pretty, but it works. Like I said, some DevCon slapped onto this and then glued in place will definitely fix that issue. As for, before I get into what I actually did to make this compatible, I did it a little bit different than what LUCHATHOR's build was, but it was funnily enough, it ended up being what he suggested as the different, or as improvements to make to the design. But anyways, so here you'll see what I ended up doing is cutting out this whole area here, and I just hacked away at it. Since I switched it to AR, I no longer needed the rotation mech, so I just pulled out all that plastic. And then the rotation mech has like a small hole right here, so I just ground that out so that when you put this in, it clears that little knobby thing there. And yeah, so like I said, there's actually a lot of shell to work with to free up some space there. Like I said, I cut down through here, I ground this down, ground that up right to the, if you're going to do this yourself, you can grind it pretty much right up to that bend there, and then just hollow out all that stuff right there. I made a small modification to the tip here, basically just so that when this is all set together, you can actually, how's it going there? But so that it all sits together, I made it too big. I didn't measure it. I just kind of hacked out a square or a little corner of it. But you definitely get it in there better if you actually measure things. But I don't really do much of that. A lot of my builds are just kind of, let's see if I can do it. So yeah, so you can reuse that piece in the next, or in your build as well. You just need to make a small change to it. As for the other half of the shell, bits are falling out. But yeah, it's essential. Oh, it's all the screws that are falling out. But it's essentially the same cut. I like I said, I do need to clear a little bit more space here, because right now this part is pushing, the plunger tube is pushing out on it. So even when I have it screwed together, I'm starting to get a little shell separation, but that should be easily fixed with a little bit more shell modding. My main goal of this was actually I basically just wanted to have a sidearm, and I didn't want to pay for a kit. And I did not really want to I just wanted to try something different. I like just kind of making useless things useful again, because I do not like the barrel attachment for that. Anyways, so like I said, that's pretty much the shell work out of the way. Let's set this aside here. Now, as for the internals, there's fairly little bit of work outside of actually cutting up the Sledgefire plunger tube here. But otherwise, you can pretty much reuse a lot of the parts stock from the from both the plunger arm and the let's get that out of there. So you can use the plunger arm and the plunger hammer or the plunger hammer and the plunger rod from a Hammershot in the Sledgefire. So it's a fairly easy that part's fairly easy to do. So here you have the Sledgefire plunger head. And I reused the original plunger arm from the Hammershot, so I didn't have to knock out this pin. What I did have to do was I ended up, if you look here, I ended up cutting up the plunger rod from the Sledgefire so that I could use these as this bit of orange plastic here as a spacer, so that when I actually put the pin back in, I wouldn't get as much wiggle. I still had some wiggle, so I ended up just grabbing a couple of washers I had and sticking them in the place to kind of eliminate that. So now if it's not a tight fit, what'll happen is the actual pin will work its way out just because it's got the room to. But if you do it like if you eliminate as much of the space as you can, it should stay in there. I've fired this quite a few times and it hasn't done anything. Otherwise, that is really the only mod I had made to the plunger head. You just cut the little spacers off the Sledgefire plunger rods, put them on the pin, add some spacers if you end up needing them. I again didn't measure anything. I just kind of cut them off and stuck them on here. So yeah, that's a fairly straightforward. As I said before, when you look down the plunger tube you'll have like this little Y shape configuration here. I ended up just, like I said, using that as a base to glue my piece of acrylic to, and then I just hacked a hole in there, and as you can see, the the intake for the air restrictor is right there. I filled up a little bit of it with DevCon. I didn't want to put too much in there, simply because I didn't want to clog up the whole thing with DevCon, because then that would have just rendered this completely inoperable. Yeah, and as I said, I cut that off. But yeah, it's a fairly straightforward mod. The reason I ended up doing this mod is I did not believe that the original plunger tube would have enough power to actually push one of these out, besides just kind of pooping it. And no one likes darts pooping out of their gun. They want them to come out with at least some force, at least stock performance. And I'm actually very happy with how this turned out. Like I said, you probably could get something like this with the kits that are available out there that make Mega, or make your Hammershot Mega. But my main thing with this is I'm not too crazy about the whole mechanism, because sometimes it doesn't. Every once in a while you'll get it where you'll click it and it won't turn the barrel, where I just kind of eliminated that to make it a little bit more reliable for me. I'm not just really a huge fan of revolvers and stuff like that. So that's part of another reason. Big reason, I wanted to see if I could do it, and I wanted to make this piece of junk worthwhile. I picked it up at a thrift store and I wanted to do something with it. Is there anything I'm leaving out? I'm sorry, this is my first time kind of doing something like this. I'll be sure to answer any questions that people have in the description. I also link to our Nerf group. If you're interested, if you're in the Wisconsin area or SheBANG area of Wisconsin, you're more than welcome to come down. I'll also leave a link to LUCHATHOR's original video where he goes into a little bit more detail. Like I said, all credit to him for this kind of unique design. Other than that, I will leave you with this little chrono test and probably get a sense of the range. I've gotten like about 40 feet with the mega AccuFakes that you can get from Litake or Worker. I forget who I bought mine from, but I'm pretty sure it's Litake or NF Strike now that I think about it. But yeah, they're actually probably some of the most accurate darts. So they actually are they are the most accurate mega darts I've found. So yeah, they also get pretty good ranges, and they're just more consistent all around. If you're looking for good mega darts and stuff like that, I highly recommend these. Otherwise, yeah, thank you for watching. Check out the chrono test. I'll leave links below if you're interested in other things. If I get if I get a couple of subscribers, I'll most likely do another one of these. I'm trying to think what I would do it on. I have a few blasters here I want to show off, but yeah. Thank you for watching. Bye. Because I'm going to take the whole thing down.
Okay, go.
Okay. Here is my mega SledgeHammer. Right now I've got it loaded up with the AccuFakes, the mega AccuFakes. If you want to see, just kind of it's not pretty, but it works. So, just doing some chrono tests. Pathetic. Wow, this thing sucks. Wow, this thing's terrible.
Yep, stock Hammershot performance.
So as you can see from the video, this is not a high performance mod. Numbers even shocked me, as you can tell from the video. I didn't think they'd be quite that low, but as my friend Titan says in the video, it's essentially a stock Hammershot. And if you think about it, it makes sense. You have a plunger tube that's probably about twice the size of what comes in a Hammershot. You're shooting darts that are twice the size of what's in a Hammershot, and I have a spring load twice the size. So basically, I made a larger Hammershot. The nice thing about it is I can holster it. It's something I basically built to take out shields and zombies, or special zombies if they have rules for it. And it's basically just a sidearm, a last resort. So yeah, it's if you're looking for high-end performance from this mod, you're probably not going to find it. I mean, if you put a heavy spring load in here, I'm not even sure what you'd need to. You might be able to get 60 out of it, but I almost guarantee it's probably not going to be thumb primable. Right now, it's barely thumb primable for me, and certainly not all the time. Like sometimes I just can't get it to catch because of the spring load, unless I really crank on it. But it's nice because I can't dry fire it because the ARs protect the internals. And yeah, so hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like I said, I'll put everything else in the descriptions. If you have questions, go ahead and ask them. I'll do as best I can to answer them. Also, one quick note, I just noticed it now. When you get into this thing, you'll find that there's 4 tabs on each corner. And what you don't want to do is, which is what I did, I just took a little clips and just cut them all off, and I ended up breaking one into the AR, so I ended up having to plug that with a little bit of whatever epoxy I had mixed up at the time. I forget if it was DevCon or if it was regular 5-minute epoxy. But yeah, that's the only reason this is. So don't just grind them off. So yeah, thanks for watching, and again, I hope you enjoyed this. Okay, bye.